Well, everyone, thank you so much for joining. Uh, I'm going to let Stuart do the full intro, but I see some familiar faces and some people that have joined a couple times, but some of you are new, so really excited to have you here. And then Stu, I think you can get kicked off and explain kind of full circle why we're hosting these conversations.
Yeah, absolutely. So this is kind of started pretty organically where we reached out to some of our partners to share the work that they're doing on sustainability and then also kind of powering closed loop systems. And we were able to kind of build this into something that's a bit episodic where we can talk about sort of the different parts of the full business model. And we've had people like Tom Zaki from TerraCycle on to talk about reverse logistics and supply chains around recycling. We've had Carrie Phillips and Stacey Flynn on to talk about branding and what that looks like. Barnett has been on with his partner Henry to talk about Better World. And so it's really great to have on Andrew from Happy Returns and Ben from Ojai to talk about the future of supply chains and logistics and D2C shipping. And really fortunate to have met both of you a couple months ago and are working together with you guys, and really excited to have you both share kind of what you're doing for Ojai and with Happy Returns, and then also just to kind of frame up the landscape of like 3PLs and logistics and reverse logistics. So I will cede the floor to you guys. I would love it if you guys could introduce yourselves, talk a little bit about each of the companies with Happy Returns and with Ojai, and then tell us a little bit about kind of the problems that you guys are solving as a company to get started, and we can kind of jump in from there.
Sure. I'll start, I guess. Hey everyone, I'm Andrew Pease. I'm the CFO of Happy Returns. Happy Returns is about a 4-year-old company. We specialize in software and reverse logistics, and that software is primarily based around returns. Our goal in life is to make returns quote unquote beautiful for the people, the retailers, and the planet. So we have sustainability core to our message. We have making users and customers happy, hence the name, core to our message. And we have making retailers save money and have a good user experience for their customers, core to our message. And kind of everything we do surrounds that aspect of life. And one of the things we've done is we've built a 700 location return bar network across the country, where you can do an in-person return just like you were going to return an item at Macy's or any store for all of a bunch of D2C brands. So think Amazon to Kohl's, except for everybody else, except we invented it first.
That's awesome. And Ben, I'll kick it over to you.
Yeah, hey, so I'm Ben. I'm the founder and CEO of Ojai. And what we do at Ojai is we are enabling sustainable same-day delivery for every other brand. And so the easiest way perhaps to think about this is as building that Amazon Prime Now experience for direct-to-consumer brands. And the way we do that is we have what we call micro warehouses, which are mini fulfillment centers located within cities. So we take unused spaces in cities and turn those into mini fulfillment centers to enable brands to get their inventory much, much closer to the end customer and do same day delivery at very low cost, but also whilst using sustainable delivery options. So predominantly bike couriers or people on foot. And so we're about a year old now, just over a year old. And we've got locations in Brooklyn, in Manhattan, LA, San Francisco, San Diego, and we're continuing to grow in this current crisis and add more cities and locations.
That's a great intro for both of you. I think what I'd love to kind of start with here is for both of you to kind of frame up like what the current landscape looks like for third-party logistics and fulfillment on D2C, and then also Andrew, to you, kind of what the returns process looks like, and then kind of what some of the biggest impediments are to enacting some of these changes that you guys are trying to make, and how sustainability has kind of changed or evolved those priorities.
Yeah, sure. So I can start off and talk about the current 3PL landscape. So 3PL stands for third-party logistics provider. It's really the easiest way to think about them is they are somebody that will pick and pack orders that you order when online, and give them off to a delivery provider who ships them to the end customer. And there's some other services that a 3PL can do, but that's generally the idea. The kind of old world 3PL that we're aiming to replace really is that traditional view of warehousing is a big box warehouse somewhere out in the middle of the country. It's a million square foot or a couple of million square foot. What they prioritize is having very low cost of storage and cheap land to store all the goods that people are ordering online on. What they're not optimizing for is delivery speed or delivery cost or sustainability. The kind of new world that Ojai is building, like I say, is focused around these micro warehouses, which are on more expensive land within cities, but by getting inventory much closer to the customer, you can significantly reduce the delivery cost when doing very, very fast delivery. And so what it means to be a old world kind of 3PL is you will process orders on behalf of customers, and then hand them over to delivery provider, and that's it. What it means under this new world is a much more tech-driven platform that enables inventory to be in the right place at the right time, that enables orders to be routed to the right places at the right time, and connects through to delivery providers to meet those very short SLAs that their customers are demanding of same day or even 2-hour delivery. So that's kind of how we see the difference in the market.
Yeah, and I just want to put a finer point on kind of the state of 3PLs today, which is that for the most part, 3PLs have been in existence, let's say the last 40 years or so, and probably even longer than that, but they really haven't changed much during that time period. They really haven't evolved a whole lot. They are basically warehouses with people, and for the most part, not very good software. They're not a technology-driven company. They are, guys who figured out how to move trucks and buy warehouses and have processes around that. But they are not very forward-thinking in general. Now, there are some 3PLs/4PLs, and Ben is, one of those companies that is trying to change that dynamic by making technology first and all of those other things second. And what's the result of the current landscape is there's a lot of inefficiency in the marketplace, and a lot of inefficiency on forward logistics and a lot of inefficiency on reverse logistics. And all that inefficiency comes with a lot of costs. And one of the things that we do with our return bars, just like Ben does at Ojai with his forward staging, is our return bars effectively become the first mile delivery center for all of our customers' returns. And then those returns, rather than being one item shipped, by mail, all across America, are being aggregated together and going directly to one of our warehouses, and then being separated and re-aggregated by retailer to be shipped to them. So instead of, give you an idea, it costs you $6 for a package, it costs you $2 or $4, right? When you do it our way, just because we're cutting out all of that inefficiencies in that process. And we do it all through the beginning point of technology.
That's really interesting. This is like a good segue into my next question around like sustainable initiatives that you guys have. Andrew, you talked a little bit about the return bars, and Ben, you talked a little bit about the first mile. What are some of like the sustainability initiatives that you guys are running and leading with? And if it is those two things you kind of have already talked about, can you kind of go into it a little bit more?
Yeah, sure. So one of the things we do in effort to be even more sustainable is every box that is used at a return bar is a reusable box. So we actually invented our own reusable box, working with a vendor that is able to be reused and reused and reused. So we actually have a circular economy with our return bars where they send us full boxes and we send them back empty boxes to be refulfilled. And so that dramatically cuts down all the cardboard that's being used. And then for forward-thinking customers, we're also doing that on the back end. So we're actually shipping reusable boxes to our customers' 3PLs, and then collecting those at the back end and resupplying and having that circle as well. So we're doing that right now today. Most of our big customers have onboarded for that, and they're very excited about it, because effectively what we call it is now it's a cardboardless return. And it's just more efficient and better for the world. The other thing we're trying to work on right now, and once our return bars open up after COVID again, we will be having reusable bags entirely throughout our system. So everything that we do at a return bar will be reusable. There will not be a single item of one use waste that's going on there.
Yeah, and I think picking up on what Andrew's saying there is one of the huge environmental costs of e-commerce is the packaging. And, you know, it really did surprise me when I started working in the industry, quite how much cardboard and wasted packaging there is involved in getting all of us our e-commerce orders. Like, I think we probably all had the experience where we end up with 5 or 6 Amazon boxes coming for a single order and have all this cardboard piled up in our apartments. And so one of the big things that we really focus on from a sustainability standpoint is eliminating that cardboard box from the last mile. And so because all of our deliveries are predominantly done point to point, then orders are not being thrown in the back of multiple trucks or through different sortation centers like they would in the traditional delivery process. Instead, it's really just someone taking it from our location and handing it to the end customer. And so that enables us to eliminate cardboard boxes from the majority of our customers and instead use like nice tote bags, like branded tote bags, which feels more premium for the customer. It feels like it's come from a store, but it's much more sustainable as well. And then the second thing that we do that really is core to us as a business is from a sustainability angle is doing e-commerce deliveries emit a lot of carbon. Like, a lot of carbon dioxide is emitted shifting inventory from the middle of the country to the coasts, which is where the majority of the demand is. And as demand for e-commerce gets faster and faster, so delivery time expectations get shorter and shorter, increasingly those parcels are being put on planes and flown around the country in order to get to customers fast enough. And that increases significantly the amount of CO2 emitted for everything that you order online. And so a big part of our mission is, by using our technology to predict what's going to be bought where and getting that inventory very close to the customer ahead of time, ahead of them ordering, it enables us to instead tap into these courier networks, these bike couriers and people on foot, to do the last mile and eliminate any of that air freight and eliminate a lot of the last mile emission costs as well. And so for us, like, you know, we believe at our core that sustainability, like Andrew said, the current 3PL and warehousing landscape really hasn't changed in 60 years. Like, it really is very much the same. And so our belief is that in the next 6 years, there needs to be a much more sustainable solution. And so we've got that as core, as part of our mission.
Yeah, and just to add on to that, you know, one of the other aspects of waste, and it was interesting that you mentioned you had TerraCycle on previously, but one of the things that we're aiming to do as much as possible is have the items that are quote unquote damaged, you know, because they can't, you know, they have a tear on their, you know, thread tear, or, you know, a little bit of a stain or something like that, that would normally just be recycled or thrown out. We're working to work as much as possible to get those donated, either directly to people that can use them, or to, you know, something like a Habitat for Humanity who resells them. We work with the home goods company Parachute that works with Habitat for Humanity as example, and we're working on those kinds of programs as well on the back end to make sure that we don't, you know, throw that stuff out. It's just a waste to do that, and when that can go to people who need it. And I think there's another really important point, which is that sustainability, at least for our company, is selfish in that that's how you make money, right? We make money by being sustainable. Sustainable doesn't have to cost you more money. Sustainable should save you money, because sustainability is all about reusing things, right? And so as long as you're smart about how you're sustainable, you should be profitably doing it.
100%. So both of you just set me up for a really good follow-up question. But one of the things that Stuart and I, obviously, we started a direct-to-consumer brand, and two of the biggest things that we've really had to dive into are, A, it's a direct-to-consumer e-commerce brand, so shipping, not in retail stores and not yet in wholesale, and 2, returns and return rate. And I don't know, this is probably each of you can tackle this from a different perspective, but just for everybody listening and joining in, like you've mentioned, warehouses haven't really changed in 40 years, but e-commerce has really picked up and changed. So how has online shopping really changed logistics, and what new problems has that created? And then Andrew, if you could dive into, because I know some of the answers, but not all of them, the problem or the actual rate of returns with online shopping in particular.
Sure. Let Stuart start, or let Ben start, and then I'll do the returns on the end, since that's usually the way it works.
Yeah, sure. And so, our view really is that warehousing really hasn't changed that much to cope with the change in e-commerce. Like, they still use the same buildings, generally out in the middle of the country. What's changed are the delivery networks that they've used to get the goods to the customer. And like I say, that is increasingly becoming air freight. Amazon now owns a fleet of 12 planes or whatever it is that it uses to fly inventory around the country. A lot of people end up using FedEx Express to fly things around the country. And so increasingly what's happened is, as e-commerce has strained those old logistics systems, the delivery networks have just had to add more capacity, whether it's air freight or increasing truck freight, to move the inventory fast enough to the customer. And so, I think Andrew pointed this out at the start, it just hasn't changed in so long. And now, remember, pre-coronavirus, e-commerce was still only something like 12% of overall commerce. I think we are seeing a significant shift now, and that this whole crisis will move a ton more demand online. And you see the existing networks creaking under it. UPS and FedEx have both suspended their delivery time promises. Amazon had to stop Prime for a bunch of non-essential items. Those traditional networks just cannot cope under this increased demand, and so there has to be something different.
Yeah, and so then on the return side of the house, it's interesting, because I do think 3PLs have evolved somewhat to just be able to, the one place they have invested technology is in all of these, racks and rollers and distribution methods to get things from their warehouse out to the door. But there's no such systems built for when items come back in the door, really. And what ends up happening is that these 3PLs are so focused on getting the items back out to everyone, or not back out, getting the items that are on the shelf out to everyone, especially during peak times. The returns often just get put in the corner, and they get to them when they get to them. And that can that can create a lot of customer problems, because for customers that aren't getting refunded until that item's been scanned and checked in and inspected and verified, that customer can sit 2 weeks, 4 weeks sometimes to wait for a refund. And then they're calling your customer service line saying, "Hey, where's my item? Where's my refund?" It's a terrible experience. And then in general, they don't really know how to process items, because really what you're doing is asking a company that's focused on outward bound shipping to then focus on folding and repackaging items. That's not what their core skill sets are, and they're not very good at it, and they don't have technology that powers it. And so the pitfalls that they run into is that they don't do it very well, they don't do it on time very well, and typically they charge a lot for it, because they've negotiated such a commodity rate on their outward bound pricing, that they have to make some money on returns, and they end up charging a lot more for returns than they should. Now they do that for the, smaller guys, and then the bigger guys, still get great rates as they have negotiating power, but they make up their margin wherever they can on that side.
That's really interesting. That was one of the most, as like a business owner, the most striking thing, where you're like, all right, this guy's just going to return it, and it's going to be really easy. I'm like, well, how many are you sending back? And if it's like not a pallet, it's just like, it becomes a nightmare.
And how do you collect, and really quickly, how do you collect individual units around the country, or especially if you're shipping internationally, and make that both economical and environmentally sound? So that's, I think, one of the reasons why a solution like Happy Returns, where it's local in-person drop-off, is so promising.
Thank you.
Yeah, I don't know if like people are really making that connection, but it was one of the biggest unlocks for us. Footwear
Yeah,
online return rates just for footwear are roughly 40%, 20 to 40%. Luckily, Thousand Fell's a little bit lower, but it's a really high percentage of clothing bought online is returned. You buy 10 things and you keep three. And that's a different user behavior that I don't think people are thinking of the environmental impact of.
definitely. Just to put a finer point on that, so apparel is averaging about 30% return rates in general. Footwear is higher because in general, most people buy two pairs at least and then return one of them because they don't know if it's going to fit or not. Everyone's sizes are different, that kind of thing. So it's even worse for footwear than it is for regular apparel, just on that sizing issue. And then, it's interesting because our end customer, the person who's actually going and doing a happy return, right? They actually do it because it's just easier for them and a better experience. And they don't have to put it in a box. They don't have to label it. They don't have, no one has a printer anymore, right? They don't have tape, all of those things, right? And so the ability to just walk it in, give it to someone, have it be an immediate refund, and you're done. Like that's why we're called happy returns, right? That's the whole point of it. It just has this huge extra impact that it is sustainable and cheaper and more powerful for everyone. And one of the things our retailers have been doing is that if they are able to make use of the return bars, they will charge for by mail shipping again, where they used to have to give it away for free, because now there is a free option for the consumer that is cheaper for them. And so they make that cheapest option free. And otherwise you're gonna have to pay for putting that in the mail and shipping it to them.
Oh, that's really interesting. I didn't even think about that. Very cool. Very cool, guys. The other thing that I'm kind of interested in talking about, and Ben, you spoke about it really briefly earlier, was kind of the change that you've seen with COVID-19. Obviously, everyone, or the majority of people, are shelter in place or stay at home. People are obviously shifting buying habits from in-store to offline. What does that look like? And I know we kind of also talked about it in the very beginning of the call before we really officially kicked off. How has that changed for your team? What have you seen change, and kind of how are you guys adapting?
Yeah, and I think it fundamentally changes how people want to get their goods and can get their goods. I think the things to remember is that for most people still get the majority of their goods in a physical store. Most people do not buy everything online. It's particularly on the coasts is where e-commerce demand is much higher. But the vast majority of people still buy things in a store, and suddenly finding that either they're scared to go to a store or the store they would normally go to is shut, fundamentally changes people's buying behavior. And what we've seen really is, I'll talk about this kind of trends we've seen in the market is firstly, we've seen a lot of that demand moving online, and a lot of the retailers that would traditionally be reliant on a physical store network for their sales, looking at ways to mimic that as best as possible through their online channels. And so same day delivery is obviously a way that you can do that. If customers go to a store, they go there because they want something then and there. If you're going to instead ask them to buy it online, you need a way to mimic that same experience of getting it that same day in the store. And so we've seen a lot of these traditional retailers coming and working with us to enable same day delivery in a way that they never would have done before. And then the second trend we're seeing is particularly the kind of consumer packaged goods companies that are direct to consumer. They would normally just sell online. They're seeing a huge increase in demand as people stay away from Amazon. If you've tried to use Amazon Prime recently, or Amazon Prime now even, you'll see that it's very hard to get a delivery slot because there's so much demand for it. And so a lot of these companies are looking for alternative solutions to be able to get their goods to customers quickly. And so it's a good problem for us to have. Like our demand has been up, but I was saying 3x. I think it's like 10x now, which is great in a way for us. It keeps us very busy. And I think that we're going to see this fundamental shift in consumer buying habits going forward. And I can talk more about that, but I think we're at the beginning of a fundamental shift in how people get their goods. In terms of the impact it has on us, as we were kind of saying before the call, when you're dealing with much higher volumes, and also trying to maintain social distancing, it ends up difficult. And so we've had to change the processes in our locations to have more of a skeleton crew there that can still get the orders through whilst maintaining social distancing. But we've also done things on the technology side. So we implemented like contactless pickup. So the delivery drivers can come and pick up from our location and just scan items in without having to physically come into contact with any of our workers. And we also introduced contactless drop-off, where we enable the customer, the end consumer, to call the courier and tell them where they want it left, and make sure that the two of them don't come into contact as well. So there's different things we had to do in the physical space to change how we were working, but also it was a good forcing mechanism to make us actually like improve the way that deliveries were done on the tech side, and add those new product features.
Yeah, and then on the return side, it's been interesting. Obviously, all of our return volume is shifted to be online, direct by mail only for the customers that we process, from what we call a full stack perspective, where we own all the end-to-end reverse logistics for that customer, including operating our online return and exchange flow for them. And one of the big things that we've been advising our customers is make sure you extend your return windows out to make your customers, feel better about keeping their items longer and potentially actually retaining them, because, the first thing that happens in a economic shock is people start returning the things that they think they don't need anymore. And so if you extend that window out another 30 days, another 60 days, another 90 days, it gives that customer time to be like, oh, well, I don't have to return this yet. I'll hold on to it for a while, see how I feel, make sure I didn't get laid off or furloughed or anything like that. And I can keep that item. So that's been, very helpful to our customers. The other thing that, we do is we try to make exchanges as much as possible. So our software tries to not force the customer, tries to give the customer an option based on why they're returning it and turning that into an exchange. So if you say, hey, this item's too small, we immediately show you the bigger item, get you to on board with that. So trying to help retailers with that as well. The other thing that we are seeing is that retailers are very interested in cost savings at this time. And so access to like our bulk shipping rates that they get is very valuable to them. In fact, we just started a 2-month free trial for all new potential customers. I didn't mean to bring that up on this call, but I'm going to anyway.
Shameless plug. I love it.
Yeah, shameless plug for our ORES. So we are, our online flow is going to be free for the next 2 months. No commitment necessary. It gets you access to all of our great return shipping rates, as well as our exchange options as well.
Andrew, super interesting. So I just want to stop on that point. You're seeing better success extending return windows rather than shortening them.
Yeah, because if you shorten a return window, you're going to force that customer to make a decision now. And, a lot of detail goes into like what happens when a customer returns something. But once a customer's returned something and they've had a somewhat unsatisfactory experience, especially because the return window is really short or they're unhappy about it, they're less likely to buy again. So you're usually losing a customer for life in order to save that, one-time fee.
So interesting.
Yeah, that is really interesting. I mean, I think what I sometimes have to stop myself from doing is like thinking about it too much, like through the lens of a business, and thinking about it more from the lens of a customer. Like no one likes the 14-day return window.
No.
The worst. You're like, this sucks. So that's really great insight. I'm going to shift the conversation slightly. Both of you kind of work really closely with other brands and with other businesses. So this is kind of a 2-part question. One, do you guys, or how do you approach sort of customer-facing messaging either at Ojai or at Happy Returns? What does that kind of look like? Is it all just kind of B2B, or is there sort of like a customer education and outreach part that you guys are working on? And then I'll kind of go from there and ask some questions around like communication challenges with these sort of new ideas to actual brands themselves.
Yeah, so I can start off on that one. From our perspective, you know, generally our customer is the e-commerce company, but it's obviously our customer's customer, the actual consumer is who we're really looking to make happy and provide like a really incredible experience. And so predominantly at the moment, most of our messaging is to the business rather than, we don't I have a particularly good Instagram or anything like that to message to the end consumer. I think it's something that is important to do for a business like ours. I'm sure Andrew can talk about what Happy Returns does there, but I think for B2B2C kind of businesses, I think it is important to be able to engage with the end consumer as well, so that they understand the service they're getting, the product that they're using. At the moment, it's not something that we do, honestly, from a size perspective. We just don't have the capacity to do that right now. But I think the messaging that we've had to be very on top of throughout this whole crisis has been around messaging to the brands that their inventory is safe, that the people that are working to fulfill their orders are safe, that, particularly as a micro warehousing company with warehouses physically within Manhattan and physically within Brooklyn and in San Francisco and LA, right in the heart of where a lot of the crisis has been happening. That's been something that we've had to be very clear with our brands about, and just assure them that we're still open, assure them that everyone's safe, that we've instigated new policies. So I think that's where a lot of the communication has been from our side.
Yeah, so Happy Returns is very interesting, right? Because we live in we live in three worlds actually. So we have three different touch points. One is our retailers, and so our online return exchange flow, it's a total B2B product. It's white labeled. It looks like it's the retailer's website when you're there. And then our return bars are a B2B product, but they have three constituents. One is the end user who's actually doing the return there. And one of the ways we interact with that end user is we do have an Instagram page that tends to promote our brands as well as us at the same time. And then we do Nps scores. So that's, we live by Nps very religiously. And so every time a customer does a happy return at a return bar, assuming they haven't done one in the last 60 days, they get a NPS survey. And our NPS score is 94 lifetime. So we put a lot of pride into that. And then our third constituent is the location partner that offers this service in partnership with us, right? And so that's the Paper Sources, the Cost Plus World Markets, the Simon Malls of the world. And, we have to make sure that they're happy with the experience as well. So we kind of, live in this world of keeping all three constituents happy at the same time and making sure that we're doing the right thing for everybody. And usually the right thing for everybody is whatever is the right thing for the end user customer. And both the retailer and the location partner are going to be happy by that.
That's really interesting. That's insightful. I wanna kind of build on that a little bit. You're both doing something that's different from kind of what's traditional or what's standard. What's sort of been the biggest challenge communicating that out to kind of your larger brand partners? Or is it something that they're like, oh, thank God, I've been looking for this forever? What does that kind of look like? What do those conversations look like?
I'll speak to the ones. The biggest conversation challenge we have is there is no person at a large retailer that owns returns. Like the only person that owns returns anywhere in the world, I think Amazon has a head of returns, but outside of that, there's like no one that owns returns. So you end up needing to interface with about 15 different people to perform that process. You need to have customer service. You need to have their supply chain people. You need to have their finance people. You need to have their operations team. Everyone needs to, and their marketing team, right? Because it's all going to be a part of their website. So it's a complicated process from that perspective. I would say the other problem that is it's a wrong way of thinking, but people do think it, and we are pushing people to stop thinking that way, is that if you make returns easier, there's going to be more returns. And what we've proven over time is that when you make returns easier, yes, your returns do go up, but your net sales increase, much more significantly. So you are paying a small price for that huge increase in growth that you're getting. But all of those things that make it easier to return also make it easier for people to buy. And customers right now are looking at return windows and return policies before they make a transaction these days. That is one of the pages that people actually check now before they make any purchase. So that's kind of like where people are going, where people are changing. Everyone's learned that, like, oh, this is how they get me. They get me on the returns now because shipping's all free and everything and everyone's kind of gotten used to how it works on the forward side. And now returns is where people are starting to, figure it all out again.
Yeah, and then from our side, I think the interesting thing that we found from a messaging perspective and when talking to brands is traditionally everyone would think of fulfillment and delivery as an operations function. And so, it'd be the head of operations within a brand that you'd be talking to talk, if you were running a traditional 3PL. What we find is generally we end up talking to the heads of marketing. And a lot of brands that we work with generally see enabling same-day delivery really as a marketing tool rather than an operations process. Now, obviously, like Andrew said, you end up with lots of different people that lots of different stakeholders within the business that need to engage with it. So the operations people get involved, but generally people will look at this as a marketing solution. And I think that was the initial thing that we didn't realize internally. We were talking to operations people, and I don't know if there's any other operations people on the call, but operations people are risk averse. It's about making sure that nothing goes wrong. And that everything just runs smoothly. And so making changes is kind of scary and it's not really something that they necessarily want to do. Marketing people are much more risk takers and looking to try new things and are really focused on growing the business rather than kind of maintaining stability. And so that was one of the big learnings that we had through our last year, is like who the right customer is, who the right person is for us to be talking to internally.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I would have imagined that it would have been operations or logistics people. Very cool, guys. I think I'm gonna turn it over to kind of like one final question, then we can switch over to the audience. But I would love to get both your hot takes on the future of logistics and like what we can kind of expect in the next 5 to 10 years and sort of where you see that heading. And you can talk about OI and Happy Returns' role in that, and then what's sort of that like longer term vision 20 or 30 years out, and that can be maybe fulfillment, but like how does that then tie in also to just like brands shopping online, selling online? Yeah.
Do you want to go first, Andrew?
I'll do it. Yeah, sure. So hard question first. All right. Yeah, so the future, it's very interesting, right? Because the world is already shifted, so much to an e-commerce world that, it's a majority of even, a lot of omni-channel customers. Nordstrom, as an example, is basically an online business with a bunch of, with some stores, with 100 or so stores, right? And that's going to continue. And I think one thing that's going to start changing more and more is that, and especially with COVID, and it's that a lot of retailers are going to start downsizing the number of locations that they're going to have. And I think the number of locations that they are going to have are going to be showrooms, not places where you actually buy the item. And that'll change, retailer by retailer, depending on what their own logistics network is. But sending a bunch of stuff to a store so that then you may have to ship out from that store is not going to save you too much, especially, if you have the right carrier network or infrastructure. Whereas, the ability to show someone something and have it at their door the next day from, a utilized, unique distribution network of warehouses, which, if you look at, what OHI is doing and those kinds of things, right, are very important so that you can have forward staged inventory that isn't sitting in one giant warehouse or one giant store taking up a lot of space. So I do see that shifting over time on the retail side. And then on the return side, I very much see customers, being, trained on the Amazon and the Happy Returns way of life, and not wanting to do anything else. And, our goal is to have 5,000 locations in the United States, in the next 3 years. And so, that will be basically as many Bank of Americas as there are in America, right? So to give you guys, some context, right? So, if it's easy to do, customers will do it. And I think what you'll see on that side, on the return side, is that return rates will continue to increase. Bracketing will continue to increase. Customers will continue all of the trends that they've been doing now today. And the companies that don't embrace that and figure out ways to make that cheaper for themselves are going to get absolutely crushed. And the companies that do embrace it can build huge brand loyalty and continue to win over and over and over again.
Yeah, and I 100% echo what Andrew's saying in terms of physical retail. I think physical retail, we've seen this trend already, is becoming much more experiential. There's no longer a need for a 15,000 or 50,000 square foot flagship store on Fifth Avenue. Like, no one goes in really and walks around taking clothes off a rack and choosing clothes in that way. Retail locations are going to become smaller and much more experiential. And as Andrew says, they're not going to hold inventory. Instead, you're going to go in, you're going to experience the brand. You'll order via an iPad, and this is something that Ojai's been doing with retailers, is enabling you to order via an iPad and get it delivered to your home a couple of hours later. And I think that's how physical retail will change. And then generally, e-commerce and retail in general, I think e-commerce is going to become obviously a huge part of the pie. It's still a very small slice of the overall commerce pie. But I think what will really grow that is we are seeing this rapid shift towards like instant retail. There's, rather than waiting that five days and 3 days now, then it was 2 days to get an order delivered. That prevents people from buying stuff. All of us are consumers, really. We see those delivery times where we say, yeah, we're not, I'm not going to wait 2 days, or I'm not going to wait 5 days for that product to come. And as we move towards this world of instant retail, I think it will seem as bizarre to us today, looking back, to say, why did I ever wait 5 days to get something? Why was that ever an acceptable time period to wait for something that I ordered? And it will seem as strange as now when you order an Uber and you're like, how did I ever cope with ordering a taxi in any other way? Like, how did it not just come in 2 minutes with a click of a button? I think that's what retail will end up looking like in the next 2 years, is it will be instant, and you'll be able to buy anything you like, anywhere, at any time, and get it delivered to you in a matter of hours. And I think as the world changes to that, e-commerce becomes a huge part of the overall pie of commerce. There's no need to go to physical stores anymore, other than to experience the brand and to try things on and determine what it is you actually want to buy online. So I think that's really what we see as a vision for the future. And so, like, e-com is absolutely here to stay, and will grow significantly over the coming years.
That all sounds.
And don't discount.
Oh, go ahead.
Sorry, I was just going to say, don't discount the power of drones to help power all of that.
I was about to ask this. I was like, this all sounds very practical. I was waiting for like the blimps and like the drone and the drone.
I mean, drones really, if they can be done right, will enable, hours delivery, right, of items rather than days of items. I mean, that's going to be the big unlock, right? When you no longer need a driver to bring that thing to your house. That's the huge unlock.
Love it.
Are you guys looking ahead at anything in regards to local manufacturing or 3D printing or closer to market manufacturing, and how that will change logistics or warehouses?
Yeah, it would be great if our retailers would build stuff in America more, and if we can do that. I think as wages continue to rise in other countries and all of that comes back, there's always a push-pull mechanism that happens, right? Which is that, like, it becomes cheaper to do something in America because you don't have to ship it all that way, and then you put it back in America, and then 5 years later it's cheaper to do it internationally again because all the wages went up. So there's always this big push-pull opportunity there, but I don't think there's ever quite been, that unlock like you mentioned, which is 3D printing and that kind of stuff, which is going to make manufacturing much simpler and better, and hopefully use a lot more recyclable materials as well to reduce waste. That can really, I wouldn't say change how logistics works in America, but it'll definitely change how manufacturing works in America. And that kind of, you would call that the first mile from where the manufacturer to wherever their staging environment is really going to change there.
Got it.
Yeah, and I think a lot of that is to do with incentives, and particularly I think once or if hopefully we'll get this at some point is some sort of carbon tax that taxes unsustainable flying items around or unsustainable manufacturing practices. I think those sorts of changes will encourage a lot more local manufacturing because suddenly it becomes uneconomical again. To Andrew's point, like the only reason people manufacture things in outside of the US is really because of cost. And so things that tax the carbon that's emitted by doing that would help shift more manufacturing local.
Guys, this has been great and super insightful. So we've got about 10 minutes left. I'm going to turn it over to anybody that wants to ask questions here. It's a small enough group. You can just kind of unmute yourself and we can go from there.
I have a question. So in light of today with COVID-19, we're seeing a lot of disruptions in supply chain models. A lot like in apparel, like on-demand manufacturing is becoming more apparent just as orders aren't being processed or orders are needing to be canceled by vendors. And I was just wanting to get more of your input on where in the supply chain do you think is being disrupted the most, or what part is hurting the most? And is that going to be a long-term either a consequence or benefit like after coronavirus when businesses are picking back up again, or just in general, what part of the supply chain is hurting the most during this time, in your opinion?
Yeah, it's a great question. From what we're seeing, the biggest impact right now is just the freight carriers, right? They're, FedEx, UPS, Amazon, they're the ones that are struggling the most to keep all of their network running at, given, people should be working from home or not working from home, or, all of that, keeping their employees safe at the same time and making sure that they're okay, and handling the dramatic increase in volume that all of their customers are seeing, and, outbound volume, especially for essential goods, right? Now, non-essentials tend to be, decreased, but essential goods are dramatically picking up in need. And they are not equipped to handle this kind of e-commerce volume, and some are better equipped than others. And I think what's going to happen is that this is a bit of a wake-up call to some of the carriers, that they need to reinvest in their networks to make sure that they can handle this volume, because it's not going to go away. It'll decrease after COVID, but then this is just an inkling of what it'll be like in the future that they're going to have to adapt to.
Absolutely, thank you.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I think we've seen multiple aspects of the supply chain hit at different times. Like you saw a crunch in kind of inbound freight into the US when COVID first started, and there was people panic buying and stocking up at supermarkets, and particularly, I'm from the UK, and we saw that in the UK where supermarket shelves were suddenly bare and the supply chain behind the scenes was struggling to catch up. And now that's caught up with that wave, as Andrew says, we're really seeing the issue on the last mile, and with all the freight carriers is they're just not designed to cope with this sort of volume. If you're suddenly taking all of that shopping that traditionally was done in a store and putting it online, that none of the logistics networks were built to cope with that huge spike in volume. And logistics is not good at spikes. Right. Logistics struggles to cope with spikes, and that's really where we keep seeing that impact. And you've seen it with Instacart had to hire 300,000 new workers because it's suddenly had so much more demand for it. You saw it with Amazon hiring hundreds of thousands of new workers trying to keep up with demand. Really, it's been on that last mile right now that a lot of the impact's being felt.
Cool, thank you.
Then really quickly, Sophia, on the brand side, I don't know if you caught our talk on Monday, but from a brand point of view, one of the biggest impacts has been, as you mentioned, canceled lines and waste material. So fabrics or materials that have been made and are ready to be produced but have now been cut or canceled. What do we do with that waste? Because materials have a half-life, and they're not really usable for a bigger brand like H&M or Gap to put into production 18 months from now. And so hopefully this leads, Stuart and I have spent a lot of time talking about this week, to brands looking to design into raw materials that can be recycled, so they can be nimble and continue to look at this waste not as a liability, but as a potential material asset.
Absolutely. I didn't even think about that. Just with so much being canceled, that if you're in the middle of production, like what are you supposed to do with all that stuff?
I don't want to mess up the number that was said on Monday, but it was like X millions of pounds of fabric is now around the world waiting to be made into garments that have been cut. What do we do with that fabric? And what if we could easily recycle it all, right? And then use it months from now. Instead of, what will probably happen is it will probably be burned or incinerated for tax write-offs.
Yeah, that's sad.
All right. Anybody else? We've got time for like 1 or 2 more questions.
No? Okay.
Guys,
Anybody on the spot?
I'll lead this outro. Thank you both for joining. This was like a good solid hour of your time. I really appreciate it. Really interesting with like how this is looking with like forward logistics and reverse logistics, how you guys are disrupting. Also, just we'll be hosting this on our site too, so I'll make sure to share that with everybody.
Yeah.
We have a lot of people that like DM us afterwards, so I will direct those links to you guys as well so that you can share.
That's great.
We really were, I'll just say a couple more words. We were really excited to host this because we think one of the, so much of our time starting a new smaller brand or starting a D2C brand today, if any of you listening are thinking of doing that, has been setting up supply chain and logistics, particularly logistics within the US for shipping, return, recapture, and then recycling. And we've been really lucky to find such great partners like Ojai and Happy Returns that are thinking ahead about micro warehousing, local, close to home, local returns, and some of the things that we don't think of as we've kind of like grown up in this internet shopping age. But some of the things that we're hoping for that, and we didn't really get into this, but maybe potentially or eventually there are carbon credits built into the cost of returns, or you're incentivized again to return locally or shop locally through platforms like Ojai. And so one of the things we're excited about is helping with Thousandfell to bring that to life over the next few years. That's it. So thank you.
I just wanted to thank both you and Stuart for hosting this. This is great. And if anyone on the call has any questions or anything like that, or wants to reach out to me directly, feel free. My email is just andrew@happyreturns.com. Very simple. I'm happy to answer any questions you guys might have on reverse logistics.
Awesome.
Yeah, and thank you from my side as well. And if anyone wants to find out more about us, we're shipohai.com, and you can reach out to us at info@shipohai.com.
Awesome, guys. Thank you so much. Enjoy the rest of your night, and we'll talk to everybody soon.
Thanks a lot. Take care, everyone.
Thanks, guys. Bye.
Bye.